Okay, we're back. We're live at the 4 o'clock block. I'm Jay Fidell. This is Community Matters here on Think Tech Hawaii. And we have Sai Bhatawadekar. Did I say that right? Did I get that right? I spent half an hour learning how to do that. Yeah. And she's going to talk about Bollywood dance at the University of Hawaii. So we are happy to have you on the show, Sai. Welcome.
Thank you, Jay, for inviting me. It's always a pleasure.
So just a brief word about you, or some questions about you. You're focused on South Asian studies, and I can understand that. You're Indian. I think I made a wild guess there. And you're a professor of Hindi and Urdu. They're both Indian languages. And that means Indo-Pacific languages and literature. This is getting wider and broader and deeper all the time. And your PhD in German-Indian comparative philosophy, you took that in Ohio State. Why German-Indian comparative? Why not Lithuanian-Indian comparative philosophy?
Well, it's a long story, but I'll tell you in very short. So when I was in India, I started actually learning German, just out of curiosity, because I was a good language learner, and I was studying Russian and many other languages at the same time. And so I pursued my BA in German studies in India, and then I applied to grad schools for German studies in the United States. So I lived a little bit in Berlin, in Germany for a while, and then I did my master's in German film studies and PhD in German comparative philosophy.
Okay, that'll keep you busy for a while.
Yeah, and I was very intrigued by German philosophers who took a lot of interest in Hinduism and Buddhism in 19th century. So I looked at what sources they read and how they understood Hinduism, and if it gelled with the kind of Hinduism I grew up with, and if it didn't, what were the reasons for it, and so on. So I learned a lot about German philosophy, but also about my own culture through my study.
Sure, because if you see it through the lens of the German philosophers in the 19th century, you see it's another look at Indian philosophy.
That's
and
right.
It enriches the whole experience, I'm sure.
That's right. So that's my journey through German studies.
How many languages do you, well, tick off the languages you speak, Sai, would you?
So I've studied 8, I think. So Marathi is my mother tongue, and Hindi, which is what I teach, and Urdu also. That's 3, English, German, Russian I used to speak.
You gave it up? Some political objection? What?
No. It was just, I think when I started doing my degree in German, Russian sort of fell by the wayside. No political reason.
Okay.
And some French and Sanskrit and so on. Okay,
so now you settled on teaching Hindi and Urdu here at the University of Hawaii. Who comes to take that? How big are your classes? Are they more than 200 people at a time?
I wish. Oh my God! Please spread the word, because we will definitely welcome 200 students in the classes. It's been different. It has gone up and down, and it's been various departmental clientele, as it were. So sometimes I get students who are doing Eastern philosophy from the philosophy and religion departments who are trying to study India. I've had students of linguistics, geography, theater and dance, and a number of eclectic interests whose common denominator is India or South Asia in general.
That's more important to us these days, it seems like to me. I mean, it's the world's biggest democracy, and it's got issues, and we want to be friends with it for lots of good strategical reasons. And the geopolitics are compelling for the United States. And hopefully one of these days we're going to have a president who fully appreciates that, coming soon. Anyway, so how do you get from all of that, from this German Indian philosophy, to Bollywood? Because that's a long train ride. How do you do that? How do you get there? What made you get into Bollywood?
Yeah, so I, like I said, in my master's degree, I actually did film studies. And at that time, because I was in the German department, I was doing German films, but what I learned around that time was also that in the 70s and 80s in India, a lot of theater directors and playwrights and movie makers were also inspired by German literature and film. So back in the day, I wrote a paper on, Marlene Dietrich's very famous movie, Der blaue Engel, the blue.
No, one of my favorite actresses
Oh, good.
back in the day. Back in the
Right,
day.
right. So Marathi, my region, actually made an amazingly stunning and beautifully, artistically beautiful movie that was inspired by the Blue Angel. And so I had written a paper a long time ago, and even though I did my PhD in comparative philosophy, my draw toward the visual arts never sort of went away. And after I came here, the first article I wrote was about a Hindi movie that came out in 2009, I think. It's called Delhi 6. Beautiful music, amazing music, but it had a protagonist who was an Indian American living in New York, who goes to Delhi to bring his grandmother home. And then he has this identity crisis about, is he an American? Is he an Indian? What does that mean to be caught between the two lines, and how he makes his own identity choices, So I wrote that article, and that kind of sort of kept me in the movie scholarship, and also sort of reminded me of what happened what happened with the presence of Bollywood in the West. So I kind of had that, and I was teaching Hindi, of course, and with, when you teach Hindi, Bollywood is a big draw for students. So you can teach with music, with poetry, with songs and dances, and that's what I was doing. And one of my students, Nada McClellan, who then became my friend and then conspirator, as it were. I started teaching Hindi through Bollywood dances, so sort of like learning vocabulary through body movement, right? So like eyes and flowers and bees.
Oh, I see the way your hands are moving.
Right.
So you are in fact a dancer then, Sai.
I became a dancer, I should say. But that, the teaching of Hindi through movement sort of blossomed into a dance group that is, free for the community. Anybody can come and learn from us. Then we started doing shows, and at Honolulu Museum of Art, we started doing shows quite regularly every year.
Mhm.
So that kind of flourished into a legitimate sort of Bollywood dance presence in Hawaii, which was not there before.
Yeah.
And
Well, you're looking at the culture through the dance. That's what and so if you want to know about the culture, come to see the dance, and people want that. And I would say, as I said before the show began, India is very popular. I mean, look at Netflix. It's got hundreds of Indian movies on it. Some in English, some with subtitles, but they're all charming, interesting. They're always family friendly, I think. And a lot of them have, well, not all of them. Okay. And a lot of them have Bollywood dancing. So what exactly is Bollywood dancing? Why do they call it Bollywood? Does it really have a connection with Hollywood?
Well, it's a problematic term, actually, Bollywood, because not all 100 years of Hindi cinema is Bollywood. And this is what I was telling you earlier when I was looking at that movie about the Indian American identity. I found out that after 1994 or so, when India opened its markets to the West, Indian film industry also understood that there was a dollar and pound spending Indian community or South Asian community in America and in England and also in Australia, actually. And they were a lucrative audience, right? So in 1995, this amazing, longest running film that came out, it's called Dilwale Dulhania Le Jayenge, which created a protagonist who was very much assimilated in Western societies and very successful and so on, but at his heart, in his values and so on, was Indian. So there was like a programmatic appeal to the diaspora, that you can live anywhere in the world as long as you're, whatever that means, Indian at heart, right? So that created a market, and that also created a sensational presence of Bollywood in the West. And from then on, of course, things have changed, genres have changed. It's arguable whether you can call all movies that come out of Mumbai Bollywood or not. In fact, a lot of scholars argue that you cannot call everything Bollywood. Bollywood is a specific genre of like song and dance extravaganzas that are happy ending movies with all sorts of emotions.
And they all have that common denominator, but I would suggest to you, tell me if I'm wrong, that there's a dynamic here, as there is in all these cross-cultural melting pot, kinds of cultural presentations, and that is that it goes global, that it takes the elements of other cultures, especially the American culture, especially the filmmaking culture, which is its own special kind of universal culture, and it goes in that direction. Don't you think that Bollywood and those Indian movies were more Indian before and maybe less Indian now? Am I right?
Well, I think it's kind of interesting, because I don't want to, because I've lived here, of course, for so long, that I have trouble separating identities in that way, right? Like what and how much are you going to call Indian if values and the impulses that you live by, the geographical location and so on, keeps changing, and how you keep sort of different influences come and become part of you, right? So you essentializing any culture is very it's always sort of problematic in the global flux of things. That's how I feel.
Okay, so I can come down to the university and watch Bollywood Indian dancing. How do I do that? Is there a website? Where do I look? Where do I go?
Well, I teach a dance class. I teach a Bollywood dance class, which is a part of the theater and dance department, and also part of the Indo-Pacific languages department. So I've created a unique sort of design for this, where on one day of the week, you learn the history of Hindi cinema, and you learn the history of the music and dance that goes into Hindi cinema. And on the other day of the week, you actually embody it. So I do choreographies, I train students from beginning to advanced, no matter what dance background they come with, or none at all. And we experience what it means to interpret poetry into different.
And you explain it.
Oh yeah. I couldn't just teach you turning the light bulb and petting the dog or whatever. No, it all comes. I think it's very, very important that Bollywood is not understood just as a movement repertoire, but as something that comes very deeply embedded in Indian culture, in poetry, in different classical, but also folk dances that find their way into it. And
okay, we have 3 clips, and we want to sort of demonstrate that point. And I'd like to ask you to take us on a little journey for the 3 clips, and we'll talk over them, and try to give people an idea of what it looks like, and its essential character anyway by these 3 clips. So why don't you just take me on the journey?
So we can start with the one on the ocean, the Ayat, AAYAT. Right, that one. And this is actually, I recently did this a month ago. This is a song, of one of my favorite songs from a movie called Bajirao Mastani that came out a couple of years ago. And the reason I'm doing this here and seated position is because when the classes went online, last semester, and we couldn't actually meet. Everybody couldn't meet in class and learn. And I also realized that people didn't have space in their houses to dance. So I created seated choreographies so they can actually just do in whatever space they were in.
This is very helpful, especially in the time of COVID. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And I still do Zoom workshops every Sunday for whoever wants to come and sort of feel a little bit uplifted.
That's very nice. Yeah.
This song is a favorite one of mine. It is it's sort of a Sufi poem about equating your beloved with God, and basically saying that everything is right now, what you just saw, everything is in flux, but you are constant in my life, and you have come, you are flowing in my life like tradition, and until I die, you're going to remain in my body like a habit. And so you can, as I express this, you can see it in my movements there.
That's you. That's you dancing.
Yeah, that's me.
Didn't you get wet?
I did. I was actually very happy that the wave came.
It's perfect. It's perfect. It helps to make the message that way. You're at one with nature.
That's right. Yeah. So that was a fun video to do, actually. Yeah.
Okay, what do we have now? We have a second clip.
Yes, the second clip is the one with another workshop that I had. So 17 minutes from that video, right. So this is actually very dear to me because it's not Bollywood as such. It comes from a folk tradition from my region. So the song is not in Hindi, it's in Marathi. And it's about...
That's your native language.
That's my native language. And it's about actually all these devotees going to the goddess, going to the mountain of the goddess and saying, we have swum across rivers and we have come to your mountain, and now you have to bless us, and we'll dance in your temple until you open the door for us. And this is a seated choreography that I modified from an actual performance that we did at the Honolulu Museum of Art in January this year. So as I said, I do a show at the Honolulu Museum of Art every January as part of the Bollywood Film Festival. And this is this is the song that we did, 5 of us. I trained and I got all the costumes from India. And it tells you, I have climbed all the mountains, please bless us. We're going to dance on your mountain. And I kind of built in the homage to Mauna Kea as well. And say, we're walking until I'm knocking on your door until you open it for us. So that's a very energetic, beautiful song. And all these, a lot of these students they come from various disciplines, psychology, mathematics, and they all, they're all sort of all levels of dancers.
They're not all Indian.
They're not all Indian. No,
Mm-hmm.
no, they're not. Yeah.
So am I right to think that these gesticulations, the hand movements, have more in them than just choreography, that there are symbolic movements that communicate ideas and values, no?
Absolutely. Like I said, they're not just movement repertoire, right? They're not just basic things that you repeat and in various combinations. But every song, I mean, if you don't really understand what the song is, you're not going to put that emotion into how you express it, And each song comes with even not just movements, but facial expressions. You have to know if you're, looking lovingly toward your beloved, or saying, no, don't come near me because I cannot see you anymore, or saying to God that I cannot have anybody else but you in all my thoughts, and I'm sort of bathing in your glory and so on, right? So each
Mhm.
movement and each facial expression comes from really, really not just knowing, but living and experiencing what that poem is about or what that context is about. I think it's very important.
And those dancers we just saw, they did know, they did
Oh, yeah, yeah,
understand.
yeah. I couldn't possibly teach a dance without letting people know what it actually means and how they should experience it.
Now, the one before that, I was interested in because it seemed like it was very emotional. It was very dramatic.
The one
There
in
was,
motion?
yes, that one, where you were dancing alone, that one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
I had the impression that you were communicating. I mean, and that it was a high tension, high emotional kind of. Am I right?
Right, right. It's a very intense song. If you listen to the music, it's extremely intense, and every change in its um, musical tone. So for example, uh, there's something calm going on, and then suddenly something changes, right? And you have to embody all these sudden movements and subtle rhythms that play underneath the tune and so on. You have to have a very discerning ear to begin with, and then the emotional investment to know that you can't simply have a choreography. Each sound that makes its presence known, you have to show it in your body, right? And each lyrical movement you have to show in lyrics, and each underlying rhythm you have to embody as you're showing the tune that goes up and down.
It's really interesting what you're talking about, and charming, I might add. So, how do you keep current on this? I mean, are you the source of this culture, this dance, the music that goes with it, or do you collaborate and consult with other people elsewhere to keep yourself at the front end of the art?
Well, I don't I can I shouldn't say the source, because I feel in my heart and body I'm kind of the conveyor, the facilitator of my culture. Maybe in Hawaii, things sort of coalesce in me because I'm the center director for South Asian Studies, and I I do as much in sort of academic context as in the community and so on. Over the years, amazing, beautiful dancers and friends have come and taught. We have all taught each other different things, and the practice of dance has grown in many different ways in Hawaii. But specifically, actually, I mean, right now I'm really excited about this world-renowned choreographer and dancer whom I interviewed last month, and you have a clip of that too.
Yeah,
So
let's see that. Yeah.
yeah, so his name is, let's see where you start the clip. But okay, so this is called Hum Saath Nahi Phir Bhi Saath Hain. We're not together and yet we are together. Astad Deboo is the world-renowned choreographer and dancer who combines classical Indian forms with contemporary. So he combines Kathak and Kathakali with contemporary dance, and he's worked with amazing names like Pina Bausch, and he has a long, illustrious career. And his three dancers, Shamsul, Govind, and Pradeep, whom I interviewed, and they have created this new project called Boundaries, which are dedicated to the migrant workers in India right now, especially in the COVID situation. And the way Astadji in the interview told us that he used corners of individual people's houses to create a stage, to create a space where they start dancing, where they feel cornered first, and they start expanding out of there. So it's a choreography of feeling trapped and cornered, and then hopefully expanding out of it. and finding your movement and finding your direction out of it. So it was I mean, I can send you the link and I can help your viewers see the entire interview as well. It was absolutely heartbreaking, heartwarming in all possible ways. Um, Personally, for me, I think because I'm a scholar and I'm invested in not just South Asian studies, but also what we call decolonizing methodology, right? So not just having um, not just having sort of a Western frame of reference, but bringing uh, and not bringing not just the world famous artists, but also the people who actually do the labor of dance, and they're extraordinarily beautiful dancers, but they don't usually get um, the footage time or whatever you call it, to have them speak and have them speak in their own languages. So all of these sort of intentions went into this interview to understand how um, each of us, but also artists among us, are creating innovative ways in which to confront this extraordinary situation that we are in. The COVID situation, the sense of isolation, the sense of being separated from um, your spaces that you usually thrive in, right? And creating a corner in your house that is symbolic of your current situation, and that of many others. So that was
It's intellectual and symbolic. It requires a lot of thought and introspection and so forth to do that. Yeah.
and he's such an amazing, not just a choreographer, but a guru. You can hear it in their voices how much they admire him as as great as their father. And he was so extremely generous and honest about their um, creative role in creating this. So he was saying this person's choreography was, they took it further, and this person could edit, which is why it gave me it was just amazing, generous of spirit.
So what is it with together and not together? There's a huge message there. Can you explain?
Yeah, I mean, this line actually came from one of the dancers, Govind, who who was just explaining how the process went, and he said, this hum saath nahi hai, phir bhi hum saath hai. We're not together and yet we're together, because they felt every single moment, they felt, like they said, trapped in their corner and isolated in their spaces. But because they were working together, and how they actually ended up creating this 5-window choreography, um, it brought them together in creative ways that lifted them up from their not togetherness, right? From their isolation, from their depression, from their worry, even about their parents. I asked them about how their parents are doing during COVID. And so it's this trying to accomplish something and finding new creative modes of overcoming the difficulty that we find ourselves in is powerful beyond words.
Well, I think we're all going through that experience,
Exactly.
and there are people that I used to see on a regular basis, and I could see the grease paint and hear the crowd and all that, and the physical experience, and now I can't, and I have to deal with them by Zoom, if at all.
Right.
And somehow, and I haven't figured this out, but I think it's right on your point. Somehow, my experience isn't the same, but I still have together with people, and I think we're all going to have to learn how to do that, because that's
Absolutely.
the wave of the future. Yeah.
And I also think that this is going to create and teach us about how to take care of ourselves and others and our loved ones and our students and our friends. I can give you a simple example. When I was teaching dance on Zoom, the half of the semester, I realized that I had to not just teach content. It wasn't about just teaching a move to them. It was about realizing what spaces they were living in, how much time they had. Their family duties had changed. People had to, make food, prepare food for their family during my class time. And so I had to be very, very conscious. And I've always taught like this, but it made it even more um, pertinent to realize that I am not teaching um, things. I'm teaching people, and I'm not grading privilege. I'm looking at progress of a human being, who is going through so many different emotions as I am, right? And I've always taught like this. Even when I've taught Hindi several years ago, I was teaching something, and there was a student in my class who started talking about, is an 18-year-old boy, and he started talking about how he has to take sleeping pills because he can't sleep. And so there was nothing else I could do but to create a segment about health, about mental health. And it wasn't about learning Hindi as an end goal. My end goal was to actually learn about him and to figure out how I can help him or how we can help him. And so Hindi became just the tool through which we went to help each other.
Did
right?
you? Did you help him?
Well, hopefully. I mean, we tried. We at least. I mean, for several years now, it's kind of funny, but the way my classes go and the way we sort of end up creating really genuine relationships with either academic or artistic or just as human beings, that has reflected in my teaching career for a long time, actually.
When I first came to Hawaii in 1965, I took a course at the university in Eastern religions,
Mhm.
and it was very interesting. And sometime I would like to do with you a show about Eastern religions and
Oh,
compare them and see this in greater detail and greater depth than we can have
absolutely.
time for today. I also wanted to ask you a couple of other points before we run out of time. And that is, you're the filmmaker, so you made this film we just saw. You
Uh,
were a hands-on filmmaker or somebody else?
no. So the actual dance video is made by Astad and Astad's student Pradeep, but I made this interview film. I made
Hmm.
that, and then he was generous enough to give me clips from his dance to insert. So yeah, I did make that film. Yeah.
Okay, and the other thing is, we're going to take that 24-minute film. We didn't see but a small part of it, and we're going to play it on our overnight feed. We play our overnight playlist every night,
And
and we're going to put it there.
I'm going to quickly let Astad Deboo know that you will do that.
Okay,
If he has any
and
questions.
again, and the other point is this: there may come a time, there may come a time when I go see Slumdog Millionaire one more time, which I remember to be a fantastic, phantasmagoric dance film.
Oh my
Now, when I go the second time, Sai,
God.
what should I be looking for? How should I see it differently now after our conversation?
Well, first of all, you shouldn't see it the second time. I'll give you so many other titles to watch. Oh my goodness. Um, uh, the second thing to remember is that it's not actually a Bollywood film. It's made by an English. Isn't it Danny Boyle? I I'm not. I think it is. Um, so it's not a Bollywood film. It's made in England by an English person. But because it was about India, everybody sort of puts it in. It's very.
Okay, I think I have my answer.
But no, but there's so many other beautiful and really amazing movies that I will definitely give you recommendations.
Okay. Well, thank you, Sai. Sai Bhatawadekar of University of Hawaii in Hindi and in dance. It's so interesting to talk to you, and it's enlightening to hear about what you do. Thank you so much,
Thank
Sai. I hope we can
thank
do
you
this
so
soon
much for
again.
inviting me. It was really fun.
Namaste.
Namaste.